divorce. And I think it was one of my longest sermons ever. And I didn't even get to all of it. So today, we're having a 1.5 sermon because we covered a lot of things, but something that a few people came up to me and asked that I didn't get around to was, what do we do with abuse? When we're talking about legitimate reasons for divorce, what do you do with abuse? And so one of the first two principles we're going to look at when it comes to abuse. And so the first one is that there's a principle out there that life always trumps law in the Word of God. So this is in Matthew chapter 12. Jesus you'll see what he's doing. He said, at that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry, began to pick some heads of grain and eat them. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to him, look, your disciples are doing what is unlawful on the Sabbath. He answered, haven't you read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? He entered the house of God, and he and his companions ate the consecrated bread, which was not lawful for them to do, but only for the priests. Or haven't you read in the law that on the Sabbath the priests in the temple desecrate the day and yet are innocent? I tell you that one greater than the temple is here. If you had known what these words mean, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the innocent. For the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. He goes on a bit later and he says, if any of you has a sheep and it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will you not take hold of it and lift it out? The law here is that, or the principle is that life always trumps law. David's life was at stake. And so he was able to do things that were not lawful for him under normal circumstances. And so when it comes to any kind of serious abuse where there is danger to the person, we desire mercy, not sacrifice. Their safety trumps all those things. Life above law. And the second is this. If you are dealing with someone or you yourself dealing with a spouse, maybe it's not life-threatening abuse, but maybe there's alcoholism and your money's always used up, or there's gambling, or there is bad behavior which is seriously affecting your well-being, seriously affecting your way of life, seriously affecting your marriage. It says this in Matthew chapter 18. It says, if your brother sins against you, or your husband, go and show him his fault, just between the two of you. If he listens to you, you have won your brother over. But if he will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen even to the church, treat him as you would a pagan or a tax collector. In other words, treat him as an unbeliever. And we talked last week about how we deal with unbelievers. There is principles and times in the Bible where you can see someone professing to be a Christian, where you treat them as an unbeliever if they don't respond to personal correction by the elders, by the church. If they continue to willfully do sin, we treat them as an unbeliever, and so they would fall into that unbeliever category that we talked about last week. If you want to know more about that, you can go watch last week's sermon. So abuse can fall under 2 principles where it is legitimate for divorce if your life is in danger. Life over law, you save yourself. You're no means to die to try to hold up this law. 2, that if there is sin, if you go through the proper processes, you treat them as an unbeliever, and then there are times where we see that that is also legitimate means for divorce with an unbeliever. So that's where abuse in divorce and marriage falls. So we will continue in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. We're going to get through a big chunk today, all right? Big chunk. Starting in verse 16. It says, how do you know, wife, whether you will save your husband? Or how do you know, husband, whether you will save your wife? Talking about staying with people, right? How even in hard marriages, you can stay. If they're willing to stay with you, you don't know. Good might come about. Nevertheless, each one should retain the place in life that the Lord assigned to him and to which God has called him. This is the rule I lay down in all the churches. Was a man already circumcised when he was called? Well, he should not become uncircumcised. Was a man uncircumcised when he was called? Well, he should not be circumcised. Circumcision is nothing, and uncircumcision is nothing. Keeping God's command is what counts. Each one should remain in the situation which he was when God called him. Were you a slave when you were called? Well, don't let it trouble you. Although if you can gain your freedom, do so. For he who was a slave when he was called by the Lord is the Lord's freed man. Similarly, he who was a free man when he was called is Christ's slave. You were bought at a price. Do not become slaves of men. Brothers, each man, as responsible to God, should remain in the situation God called him to. Now about virgins, I have no command from the Lord, but I give a judgment as one who by the Lord's mercy is trustworthy. Because of the present crisis, I think that it is good for you to remain as you are. Are you unmarried? Do not seek a divorce. Are you married? Do not seek a divorce. Are you unmarried? Do not look for a wife. But if you do marry, you have not sinned. And if a virgin marries, she has not sinned. But those who marry will face many troubles in this life. I want to spare you this. What I mean, brothers, is that the time is short. From now on, those who have wives should live as though they had none. Those who mourn as if they did not. Those who are happy as if they were not. Those who buy something as if it were not theirs to keep. Those who use the things of the world as if not engrossed in them. For this world in its present form is passing away. I would like you to be free from concern. An unmarried man is concerned about the Lord's affairs, how he can please the Lord. But a married man is concerned about the affairs of this world, how he can please his wife. And his interests are divided. An unmarried woman or virgin is concerned about the Lord's affairs. Her aim is to be devoted to the Lord in both body and spirit. But a married woman is concerned about the affairs of this world, how she can please her husband. I'm saying this for your own good, not to restrict you, but that you may live in a right way in undivided devotion to the Lord. If anyone thinks he is acting improperly toward the virgin he is engaged to, and if she is getting along in years and he feels he ought to marry, well, he should do as he wants. He is not sinning. They should get married. But the man who has settled the matter in his own mind, who is under no compulsion, but has control over his own will, and who has made up his mind not to marry the virgin, well, this man does the right thing. So then he who marries the virgin does right, but he who does not marry her does even better. A woman is bound to her husband as long as he lives, but if her husband dies, she is free to marry anyone she wishes, but he must belong to the Lord. In my judgment, she is happier if she stays as she is. And I think that I, too, have the Spirit of God. It's a long passage. But it's all saying one thing. First off, Paul knew the church was about to go intense persecution. The Roman Empire was about to come down real heavy on Christians in a serious way. Some of the most heinous crimes against humanity were about to happen against the Christians in Rome. And Paul, though not knowing the specifics, could feel it in himself that trouble was brewing. And so he was warning the Corinthians. He's saying, look, because of the present times, he says, you should look to the Lord. There's going to be a time where having a wife may not be a blessing because you're going to worry about her so much in the times to come. Where having a husband may not be a blessing because you're going to be distracted by worldly things and not just focused on the Lord. And so he is trying to give the answers to their questions, but his main goal here is whatever you do, just get serving the Lord. He says each one should just stay where he is and serve the Lord. There was people who came to the Lord as slaves, people who came to the Lord as married, people that came to the Lord as unmarried. All these people are coming to the Lord and they're saying, now what? What do I do? How do I please the Lord? Is there something I should be doing, somewhere I should be going? And he's saying, look, serve the Lord where you are. If you're an unmarried person, fantastic. Serve the Lord. If you're a married person, sure. Serve the Lord. Are you a slave? Hey, if you can get free, do so. But man, serve the Lord as a slave. Are you a freed man? Hey, serve the Lord he's just saying, wherever you are, serve the Lord. See, the problem is they start to get this thoughts that, well, I'm a Christian, and once I get to point A, then I can serve the Lord. If I came to the Lord as a slave, well, once I am free, I am no longer a slave, then I can serve the Lord. But Paul's saying, well, why would he do that? He called you as a slave. He doesn't care. Serve the Lord now. But the problem is we set our own restrictions on ourselves all the time about when we'll serve the Lord. Well, once I have enough learning, once I've done some studying up, maybe once I've taken a few online courses, then I'll be able to speak to people. Then I'll be able to evangelize. No, do it now. The Lord doesn't care if you have courses. He's not looking at your Google resume. Oh, good, you did 3 online courses about evangelism. He says, no, just do it now. Well, once I get married, then I'll really be able to serve the Lord better because I have a partner. No, just serve the Lord now. Who cares about what the future holds for you? Yes, the Lord will create great opportunities for you to serve Him in the future. We should work towards those opportunities to serve Him. But what it should not do is stop us serving Him now. As we sit here and go, well, once I get there, then I'll serve the Lord. The whole point of Paul's just saying, look, I don't care. As long as you're acting, in accordance with the law and you're not being gross and you're not being sexually immoral, just serve the Lord. Married, unmarried, divorced, undivorced, just serve Him wherever, whenever, however. It's like the guy who has $20 in his pocket. And he says, you know what? I think I'm going to buy a whole bunch of lottery tickets. And when I win it big, I'm going to give 50% to the church. And I'm going to do great things for the Lord. And I'll say, well, how about you take that $20 and you go buy somebody lunch? Did not Jesus say that if you give a cup of water to a lowly one of these, you've done it unto me? Would you take that $20 and invite somebody out for coffee to pray for them and encourage them? No, that doesn't cross our mind because we think, well, only really rich people can serve the Lord with their money. It's not true. Anybody can serve the Lord right now. You don't have to reach some level or reach some certain monetary goal. That's the amazing thing about Christ is He has called you as you are. He has called you as you are. One of the most amazing things, when I was starting to take over this church, I was an associate elsewhere, and they knew, and the word that the Lord keeps speaking to me, I'm very grateful that it says, look, I have called you to pastor as you. You don't need to try to become something different or try to become a pastor. I'm calling you. With all your ridiculousness and your silliness and all the other, I am calling you to this position as you. Not to change you into somebody you're not, because I can use you as you are. And he wants to do that for you. He wants to use you as you are. Be you serious or silly, be you eloquent or not. He wants to use all the things that He gave you at birth to glorify Him. But we can sit back and say only these kind of people can glorify God, only those kind of people. Well, once I reach this, but really we're just being lazy. I saw this great quote just yesterday. And it says, it's about time travel, okay? But everybody believes, right, that if you travel back in the past and you change one small thing, right, you go back to your present time and everything's changed, right? And that makes sense. The smallest thing that you do in the past could change your future. But we don't believe that small things today can change the future. Why don't we believe that one small act of kindness today could vastly benefit the future? We believe that if you went back in the past and did it, it would completely change everything. But we completely neglect that today we can change the future in really small ways just by serving God wherever we are. Because He loves to use us in our weaknesses, in our failings, not because we've gotten so much learning or scholarship. I know people who have no learning or scholarship at all, and they bring way more people to Christ than the learned ones. It's not a matter of intelligence or what you know. It's a matter of your heart towards God. Everybody has that line of, I'm willing to be used by God once I reach this point, once I feel like I'm strong enough or I can, once I feel like I've got things in control. But Paul's saying, no, God is calling you now. I can't imagine if I was a slave and you get called to Christ and you come to church and you see all these free people and you think, how can I, a slave, serve God? And if I'm not free like these men, they have so much more benefits than I do. How could, but Paul's saying, no, just, man, if you can become free, that's great. But just serve the Lord in what you're doing. Serve the Lord in who you are now because He called you now. He didn't wait until you had courses to call you and say, I want to call you. He called us in our sin and our depression. He called us in our depravity, and He said, I want to use you. The biggest thing preventing us from moving is this thought that we're just not there yet. We're just not there yet. Maybe a few more months of going to church, I'll be ready to step up and help out with the Sunday school. Maybe a few more years and I'll be ready to host a Bible study. Maybe a couple more believers and proclaimers and I'll be ready to talk to my friend about Jesus. Paul's warning is, I don't know if you have the time. That time is short. I don't know if you're going to have enough time to reach that point. You may not get it. The person you're thinking about may not last that long. You may not last that long. This whole dang world might not last that long. The time is short. He says, you know what? From now on, just count everything that you have. Who cares? If you have lives, live as if you had none. If you don't, who cares? Just live now. Because we may not get another chance. We always think we'll get another crack at the bucket, but that just isn't true. It's like that parable that Jesus tells about the people that they made all their plans, right? We're going to go to this in this city, and we're going to trade here, and we're going to do this. And He says, you fools, you're not going to get there. This very night your life is demanded of you. And what did you do? Well, I made a bunch of plans, Lord. The Lord uses the weak. He uses the weary. He uses the uneducated. He uses the young. He uses the old. He uses them all because in our weakness His strength is made perfect. So it's on us to move now. Make plans for the future. Like He said to the slave, make plans. Try to become free. Save up your money. Like He says to the young woman, hey, it's okay. If you plan to get married, that's great. Make sure you marry a man in the Lord. Make sure he's going to serve you. Make sure he's going to love you. Make those plans. But don't let it stop you from serving God right now. Because His plan is always in motion. Always in motion. The small things that we can do today, they can impact the future in amazing, amazing ways. And we just don't know if we have any more time than now. We're not guaranteed it. Let me pray over you. Let me pray over us. That we would serve the Lord in all circumstances and in all ways. And not let ourselves be hindered by thinking that we need to be something else than what we are. Father, we ask for your strength and your boldness today. We are so thankful that you have come to us as we are and offered salvation. that there's no bar we got to get over, no hoops we need to jump through, but that you did all that for us. That we could come as we are and know, Lord, that you want to use who we are in real and meaningful ways to the people around us. Help us, Lord, to not wait. We push back those heavy burdens that Satan puts on our shoulders of you're not good enough and it's not going to work and you need to be more and you need to be more. Allow us to shake those off, to stand and say, I am a child of God, and God's going to use me whether I know stuff or I don't, whether I'm strong or I'm weak. The Lord will work because I trust in him. Help us, Lord, just to be about your work today, even as we plan for the future. We ask this in your great and mighty name, Jesus.